Sarah Mitchell pushed her baby stroller through the busy corridors of JFK Airport, her heart racing with exhaustion and worry. The red-eye flight from London had been delayed by 3 hours, and her 6-month-old daughter Emma had cried for most of the journey. Dark circles shadowed Sarah's eyes as she navigated through the maze of travelers, each step feeling heavier than the last. The airport buzzed with its usual chaos. Announcements echoed overhead in multiple languages. Luggage wheels clattered across the polished floors, and hundreds of conversations merged into a constant hum of noise. Sarah had been traveling alone with Emma, returning to New York after visiting her sick mother in England. The trip had been emotionally draining, and now she just wanted to get home to their small apartment in Queens. As she approached the security checkpoint leading to the main terminal, Sarah noticed something unusual. A tall man in an immaculate uniform stood near the entrance, his posture rigid and alert. Unlike the regular airport security personnel in their standard blue uniforms, this man wore something different. His uniform was deep navy blue with gold braiding, and his bearing suggested military training. Most striking of all was the ceremonial sword at his side and the distinctive tall black hat that marked him as a member of the Queen's Guard. Sarah blinked hard, wondering if her exhaustion was making her see things. What would a British Royal Guard be doing at JFK Airport in New York? She had seen these guards many times during her years living in London, standing motionless outside Buckingham Palace and other royal residences. They were famous for their discipline and their ability to remain perfectly still for hours. No matter what distractions surrounded them, the guard's eyes swept across the crowd with practiced efficiency, taking in every face and movement. When his gaze landed on Sarah and her stroller, something changed in his expression. Eyes narrowed slightly, and he took a step forward. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she realized he was moving directly toward her. Emma began to fuss in her stroller, her tiny fists waving in the air as she sensed her mother's growing tension. Sarah tried to soothe her daughter while keeping her eyes on the approaching guard. His movements were deliberate and purposeful, cutting through the crowd with an authority that made other travelers step aside without question. "Ma'am," the guard's voice was deep and carried a crisp British accent as he reached Sarah's position. "I need you to stop right there." His tone was polite but firm, leaving no room for argument. The conversations around them began to quiet. As people noticed the unusual scene unfolding, Sarah's mouth went dry. "Is there a problem, officer?" she managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. She instinctively placed her hand on Emma's stroller, as if protecting her daughter from some unseen threat. The guard's sharp eyes studied Sarah's face intently, then shifted to examine the stroller with the same careful attention. "I'm going to need you to step aside with me, ma'am. There are some questions I need to ask you." His hand moved slightly, a gesture that Sarah couldn't interpret but that made her heart pound even faster around them. Other travelers began to slow their pace, sensing drama in the air. Some pulled out their phones, ready to record whatever was about to happen. Airport security personnel noticed the commotion and started moving in their direction, the radios crackling with urgent communications. Sarah felt trapped, surrounded by curious onlookers and official personnel. Emma's fussing grew louder, picking up on her mother's distress. The fluorescent airport lights seemed too bright, and the noise of the terminal faded to a dull roar in Sarah's ears as she faced the mysterious royal guard who had singled her out from hundreds of travelers. "I don't understand," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "We just got off a flight from London. I'm just trying to get home with my baby." She looked down at Emma, who was now crying in earnest, her face red and scrunched with frustration. The guard's expression remained unchanged, professional and unreadable. But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of something that might have been recognition or concern. "Ma'am, I understand this is confusing, but I need your cooperation. This won't take long, but it's very important." The crowd around them continued to grow, creating a circle of curious faces and raised smartphones. Sarah felt exposed and vulnerable, standing in the middle of one of the world's busiest airports with her crying baby, facing questions she didn't understand from a man whose very presence seemed impossible. The guard gestured toward a quieter area near the wall, away from the main flow of foot traffic. Sarah reluctantly followed, her hands gripping the stroller handle so tightly her knuckles turned white. Each step felt like walking through quicksand, her legs heavy with dread and confusion. "My name is Sergeant James Wellington," the guard said, once they reached the more secluded spot. His voice carried the weight of authority, but Sarah detected something else beneath the formal tone: urgency. "I serve with Her Majesty's Grenadier Guards, and I'm here on official business." Sarah stared at him, trying to process this information. "But this is New York," she said weakly. "Why would a British Royal Guard be here? Why are you stopping me?" Sergeant Wellington's eyes continued to scan their surroundings, even as he spoke to her. "Ma'am, I need you to think carefully. During your time in London, did you visit any official buildings, government offices, royal properties?" The question caught Sarah off guard. She had spent most of her visit at her mother's bedside in the hospital, with only brief trips to handle legal paperwork related to her mother's estate. "I went to some solicitor offices," she said slowly, "and I had to visit the American embassy to renew Emma's passport. But nothing unusual happened." Wellington's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "The embassy visit, when was this?" "3 days ago," Sarah replied, bouncing Emma gently as her daughter continued to cry. "It was just routine paperwork. They took new photos of Emma for her passport renewal. The whole thing took maybe an hour." Something in Wellington's expression shifted. He pulled out a small device that looked like a modified phone and spoke into it in clipped professional tones. "Control, this is Wellington. Subject confirms embassy visit. 3 days ago. Request immediate verification of Protocol 7 status." Sarah felt her blood turn to ice. "Protocol 7? What is that? What's going on?" Her voice rose above the ambient noise of the terminal, causing more heads to turn in their direction. Before Wellington could answer, his device crackled with a response. The voice was tinny but urgent. "Wellington, we have confirmation. The package was flagged during routine screening. Subject's infant matches description. Proceed with extreme caution." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. "Package, my baby? What are you talking about?" She pulled Emma closer to her chest, the maternal instinct to protect overwhelming her. Confusion and fear. Wellington held up a hand in what was meant to be a calming gesture. "Mrs. Mitchell, I need you to remain calm. Your daughter is not in any immediate danger, but we believe something may have been concealed in her belongings without your knowledge." "That's impossible," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "I packed everything myself. I've been with her constantly. No one else has touched her things." "Ma'am, there are sophisticated methods of concealment that you wouldn't notice," Wellington explained, his professional mask slipping slightly to reveal genuine concern. "During your embassy visit, was Emma ever separated from you? Even for a few minutes?" Sarah's mind raced back to that day. She had been stressed, dealing with bureaucratic procedures while managing a fussy baby. They took her into another room. "For the passport photos," she admitted slowly. "I had to wait outside because of some regulation about lighting and background setup. But it was only for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Wellington's expression darkened in the stroller. "Was it with you or with Emma during the photo session?" "It stayed with me in the waiting room," Sarah said, then stopped. A memory surfaced, sharp and clear. But wait, there was a woman there.
Ouch.
She said she worked for the embassy. She asked if she could look at Emma's stroller because she was shopping for one for her own grandchild. She seemed so nice, so normal. The sergeant was already speaking into his device again. "Control, we have probable cause for concealment during embassy visit. Request full forensics team to current location immediately." Around them, the airport seemed to continue its normal rhythm, but Sarah felt as if she had stepped into a nightmare. Regular travelers walked by, unaware that something extraordinary was unfolding just feet away from them. The smell of coffee from a nearby cafe mixed with the sterile airport air, creating an oddly normal backdrop for the surreal conversation. "Sergeant Wellington," Sarah said, her voice steadier now, despite her fear, "I need you to tell me exactly what you think someone did to my baby stroller. I need to know why a British Royal Guard is handling this instead of American authorities." Wellington looked directly into her eyes for the first time, and Sarah saw something there that made her breath catch. Not just professional concern, but personal understanding. "Mrs. Mitchell, what I'm about to tell you will sound unbelievable. But 3 days ago, during a routine security sweep at the American Embassy in London, we discovered evidence of an international smuggling operation. Items of extremely high value and sensitivity were being moved through unsuspecting travelers." Sarah felt the world tilt around her as Wellington's words sank in. Smuggling operation. You think someone used my baby? The protective fury that rose in her chest was unlike anything she had ever experienced. "It's not used Emma directly," Wellington clarified quickly. "But we believe items were concealed in baby equipment belonging to several travelers who visited the embassy that week. The operation was sophisticated. They targeted mothers traveling alone with infants. Because security screenings are often less thorough when babies are involved." Emma had finally stopped crying and was looking up at her mother with wide, curious eyes. Sarah realized she'd been holding her daughter so tightly that her arms were shaking. She forced herself to relax, taking deep breaths to calm her racing heart. "What kind of items?" Sarah asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Wellington glanced around to ensure they couldn't be overheard. "Classified documents, digital storage devices, items that certain parties would pay enormous sums to obtain." He paused, studying Sarah's face. "The woman who approached you about the stroller, can you describe her in detail?" Sarah closed her eyes, trying to recall every feature of the friendly embassy employee who had seemed so interested in Emma's stroller. She was middle-aged, maybe 50 or so, brown hair pulled back in a bun. She wore glasses with thin frames, very professional looking, with a navy blue blazer. She had an American accent, but something about it seemed slightly off. "What do you mean by off?" Wellington pressed. "I can't put my finger on it," Sarah admitted. "Maybe it was too perfect. It's like someone who had learned to speak American English very well, but it wasn't quite natural." She opened her eyes and looked at Wellington with growing alarm. God, she wasn't really an embassy employee, was she? Before Wellington could answer, 2 more uniformed figures approached them. Sarah recognized them as airport security, but they moved with the same purposeful authority as Wellington. Behind them came a woman in a dark suit, her ID badge marking her as FBI. "Mrs. Mitchell," the FBI agent said, extending her hand. "I'm Special Agent Patricia Reyes. Sergeant Wellington has been working with us on this case. We understand this is frightening, but we need to examine your daughter's stroller immediately." Sarah instinctively pulled Emma closer. "Want to know exactly what you're looking for and why you think it's in my stroller. I'm not letting anyone touch my baby or her things until I understand what's happening." Agent Reyes exchanged a look with Wellington. Sarah caught something pass between them, a recognition that she wasn't going to be easily dismissed or intimidated. "You have every right to know," Reyes said. 3 days ago, British intelligence intercepted communications suggesting that stolen NATO defense protocols were being smuggled out of London through the American embassy. The words hit Sarah like cold water. NATO protocols. You mean military secrets? Highly classified information? That could compromise national security for multiple allied nations, Wellington confirmed. The intercepted messages mentioned using innocents with children as unwitting carriers. Your visit to the embassy, combined with your flight to New York, matches the timeline perfectly. Sarah looked down at Emma's innocent face, then at the stroller that had seemed like such a practical purchase just 6 months ago, when Emma was born. How would they even hide something in a stroller? I mean, I use it every day. Wouldn't I notice if something was different? Agent Reyes knelt beside the stroller and pointed to various components without touching them.
Ouch.
Modern baby strollers are complex pieces of equipment. Hollow tubes, removable fabric panels, storage compartments. A skilled operative could conceal micro-storage devices in ways that wouldn't be immediately obvious to the owner. The woman at the embassy, Wellington added, likely installed whatever was hidden while you were distracted during Emma's photo session. The entire operation would have taken less than 5 minutes. Sarah felt sick. She had been so focused on managing Emma and the paperwork that day, stressed about her mother's condition and the complicated legal processes she was handling. The embassy employee's friendly interest in the stroller had seemed like a pleasant distraction, a moment of normal human connection in an otherwise overwhelming day. "If this is true," Sarah said slowly, "then I've been carrying stolen military secrets across international borders. Could I go to prison for this?" Agent Reyes stood up and spoke with surprising gentleness. "Mrs. Mitchell, if our suspicions are correct, you're a victim, not a criminal. You had no knowledge of what was being concealed, and you've been fully cooperative since we approached you. Our primary concern is recovering the materials and identifying the individuals responsible for this operation." Wellington's radio crackled again, and he stepped slightly away to take the call. Sarah could hear fragments of the conversation words. Like forensics team, an immediate extraction that made her stomach clench with anxiety. When he returned, his expression was grim. "Mrs. Mitchell, we need to move to a more secure location. The forensics team is ready to examine the stroller, but it needs to be done in a controlled environment." "What does that mean for Emma and me?" Sarah asked. "Are we under arrest? Can I call someone?" "You're not under arrest," Agent Reyes assured her. "But until we can determine exactly what we're dealing with, we need to keep you both safe. If the people behind this realize we've discovered their operation, they might see you as a threat." The implication sent a chill through Sarah's entire body. She had gone from being an exhausted mother trying to get home with her baby to being potentially in danger from international criminals. The fluorescent lights of the airport seemed harsher now, and every face in the crowd looked potentially suspicious. Agent Reyes led them through a series of corridors that Sarah had never seen before, away from the public areas of the airport. Wellington walked beside them, his hand resting casually but deliberately near his radio. Emma had fallen asleep in her mother's arms, blissfully unaware of the drama surrounding her. They entered a sterile, windowless room that looked like a cross between a medical examination area and a high-tech laboratory. Several people in white coats and latex gloves waited inside, along with equipment that Sarah couldn't identify. The contrast between this secret world and the normal airport terminal just minutes away was jarring. Before we begin, Agent Reyes said, "I want to explain exactly what's going to happen. Our forensics team will carefully examine every component of Emma's stroller. If they find anything hidden inside, they'll extract it safely without damaging the stroller itself. The whole process should take about an hour." Sarah settled into a chair, still holding Emma protectively. "And then what? If you find these stolen documents or whatever, what happens to us?" "If we recover classified materials," Wellington answered, "you'll be debriefed about your experiences in London. We'll need detailed statements about everyone you encountered, everywhere you went. But after that, assuming no other complications arise, you'll be free to go home." One of the forensics technicians, a woman with short gray hair and kind eyes, approached them carefully. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Dr. Sarah Chen. I specialize in non-invasive examination techniques. I want to assure you that we'll treat your daughter's stroller with the same care we'd use on a priceless artifact." Despite everything, Sarah found herself slightly comforted by Dr. Chen's calm professionalism. "Thank you. This stroller has been with us since Emma was born. It's been through a lot." Dr. Chen smiled. "I have a granddaughter about Emma's age. I understand how important these things become." She turned to her team and began directing them in quiet, efficient tones. Sarah watched as they began their examination, using small cameras, ultrasound devices, and other instruments she didn't recognize. They worked methodically, checking every joint, every tube, every fabric panel. The process was oddly hypnotic. Sarah found herself holding her breath without realizing it. After about 20 minutes, one of the technicians made a soft exclamation. "Dr. Chen, I'm getting anomalous readings from the right handlebar assembly." Sarah's heart jumped. "Anomalous readings? What does that mean?" Dr. Chen moved to examine the area herself, running a small scanner along the stroller's handle. "It means there's something inside the handlebar that shouldn't be there. The metal tubing appears to have a hollow space that's been filled with something denser than air." Wellington and Agent Reyes moved closer to observe as Dr. Chen's team began to carefully disassemble the handle mechanism. Sarah found herself leaning forward despite her anxiety, fascinated and horrified by what they might discover. There, Dr. Chen said softly as one of her technicians lifted out a small sealed cylinder no bigger than a lipstick tube. It's what's inserted into the hollow handle and secured with expanding foam that would be nearly invisible once the handle was reassembled. Agent Reyes pulled on latex gloves and carefully took the cylinder. This is definitely not standard stroller equipment. She examined it under a magnifying glass, then looked at Wellington. What do you think, storage device? Almost certainly, Wellington confirmed. The size and construction are consistent with high-capacity encrypted storage designed for covert operations. Sarah stared at the tiny cylinder that had been hidden just inches from where she placed her hands every time she pushed Emma's stroller. I can't believe it. I've been pushing that stroller for 3 days, and I never felt anything different. The modification was expertly done, Dr. Chen explained. The weight distribution was carefully calculated so that the balance of the stroller wouldn't change noticeably. Most people wouldn't detect such a small alteration. But what if airport security had found it during our departure from London? Sarah asked. What would have happened to me and Emma? Wellington's expression was serious. The people behind this operation likely had contingency plans. If you had been caught, they would have made sure all evidence pointed to you as a knowing participant, rather than an unwitting victim. The thought made Sarah feel sick. She looked down at Emma's peaceful, sleeping face and realized how close they had both come to disaster without even knowing it. So what's on this thing? What was worth risking an innocent baby's safety? Agent Reyes was already connecting the cylinder to a specialized computer system. We'll know soon. Our tech team will need to decrypt the contents, but based on the intelligence we've gathered, likely contains NATO defense protocols that were stolen from a secure facility in Brussels 6 months ago. 6 months ago? Sarah repeated. But Emma's only 6 months old. This has been planned for that long. Longer, Wellington said grimly. We believe this operation has been in development for over a year. The timing of your embassy visit was no coincidence. They had been monitoring travel patterns and identified you as a suitable, unwitting courier weeks in advance. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The idea that strangers had been watching her and Emma, planning to use them, in an international espionage operation was almost too much to comprehend. How did they know I would be at the embassy that day? I only made the appointment 2 weeks before my trip. Embassy appointment systems are not as secure as they should be, Agent Reyes admitted. It's possible they had access to scheduling databases. Or they may have had someone inside the embassy feeding them information about travelers fitting their target profile. Dr. Chen's team had finished their examination of the stroller and was reassembling it with careful precision. Miss Mitchell, we found no other foreign objects. Your daughter's stroller is now exactly as it was when you purchased it. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and lingering anxiety. The immediate threat was over, but the knowledge of how close they had come to being used as unwitting criminals would take much longer to process. 2 hours later, Sarah sat in a different room with Emma on her lap, watching as Agent Reyes and Wellington huddled over computer screens displaying streams of decrypted data. The tiny cylinder had indeed contained what they suspected highly classified NATO defense protocols that detailed missile defense systems across Eastern Europe. Mrs. Mitchell, Agent Reyes said, turning away from the screens. What we've recovered here represents one of the most significant intelligence breaches in recent years. The information on this device could have compromised the security of millions of people across multiple nations. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she had unknowingly carried. I still can't believe someone used Emma like that. What kind of person puts a baby in danger for stolen documents? The kind who see other people as nothing more than tools, Wellington said with quiet anger. But I want you to know that your cooperation today has likely prevented a catastrophic security breach. The people responsible for this will face serious consequences. Emma began to fuss, and Sarah realized she needed to be fed soon. What happens now? Can Emma and I go home? Soon, Agent Reyes promised. But first, we need you to help us understand everything that happened during your time in London. Every person you spoke with, every place you visited, the smallest detail might be important. For the next hour, Sarah recounted her trip in exhaustive detail. She described the hospital where her mother was staying, It's a solicitor's office where she handled estate paperwork, the small hotel where she and Emma had stayed. She described every interaction at the embassy, from the security guard who checked, her identification to the photographer who took Emma's passport pictures. "The woman who examined your stroller," Wellington said. "Tell us again about her appearance and manner." Sarah closed her eyes, trying to recall every detail. She seemed genuinely interested in the stroller as a product. She asked about the brand, where I bought it, whether I was happy with how it handled. She even commented on how well Emma seemed to sleep in it. Did she touch the stroller? Handle it in any way? Yes, Sarah said slowly. She asked if she could test how it folded and unfolded. She said her daughter was expecting twins and needed something that would be easy to manage. I thought it was sweet, a grandmother wanting to help with baby gear. Agent Reyes and Wellington exchanged meaningful looks. That folding and unfolding process would have given her the perfect opportunity to install the hidden cylinder, Reyes said. She could have completed the entire operation in less than 2 minutes while you were distracted by conversation. Wellington pulled out his phone and showed Sarah a series of photographs. "Do any of these women look familiar?" Sarah studied the images carefully. The third photograph made her breath catch. That's her. That's the woman from the embassy. Face in the photo was unmistakably the same. The thin-framed glasses, the professional demeanor, even the navy blazer. "Marina Volkov," Wellington said grimly. "Former Russian intelligence operative, now working freelance for the highest bidder. She's been wanted by Interpol for 3 years in connection with industrial espionage and document theft." Russian? Sarah felt another wave of shock. But she sounded American. Volkov is fluent in 6 languages and is known for her ability to assume different identities convincingly, Agent Reyes explained. "The fact that you noticed something slightly off about her accent shows good instincts." Sarah looked down at Emma, who was now awake and looking around the room with curious eyes. She smiled at Emma. She seemed to genuinely like babies. "How can someone be that good at pretending?" Professional training, Wellington said. "People like Volkov spend years learning to manipulate others through emotional connections. A maternal instinct you felt when she showed interest in your baby was exactly what she was counting on." A new person entered the room, a man in an expensive suit who carried himself with obvious authority. Agent Reyes stood up immediately, and even Wellington straightened his posture. "Mrs. Mitchell," Agent Reyes said, "this is Deputy Director Harrison from the FBI. He wanted to thank you personally." Deputy Director Harrison extended his hand with a warm smile. "Mrs. Mitchell, I understand you've had an extraordinarily difficult day. I want you to know that your cooperation has been instrumental in shutting down an operation that threatened national security on multiple levels." Sarah shook his hand, still feeling surreal about the entire situation. "I just want to take my daughter home and try to process all of this," of course, Harrison said. "But before you go, I want to assure you that we'll be providing ongoing security monitoring for you and Emma. The people behind this operation may not realize immediately that we've discovered their scheme, but when they do, they might see you as a potential threat." The words sent a chill through Sarah. "You mean we could still be in danger?" "It's unlikely," Harrison said quickly. "We don't take chances with civilian safety. For the next few months, there will be periodic security checks on your apartment and neighborhood. You'll also have a direct contact number to call if anything seems unusual or suspicious." Wellington stepped forward. "Mrs. Mitchell, I know this has been frightening, but I want you to understand something. What happened to you today being stopped by security, having your belongings searched, it probably saved your life. If that storage device had been discovered by the wrong people, or if rival intelligence agencies had traced it to you, the consequences could have been severe." Sarah realized that her initial fear and resentment at being stopped had been completely misplaced. "You mean you were protecting us, not threatening us?" Exactly, Wellington confirmed. "When we identified you as a potential unwitting courier, our primary concern was your safety and Emma's. The recovery of the classified materials was important, but not more important than ensuring that an innocent mother and baby weren't harmed by forces beyond their understanding." Emma had begun to cry softly, and Sarah recognized the familiar sounds of hunger and tiredness. Can we please go home now? She needs to eat, and I think we both need to sleep in our own beds." Agent Reyes nodded sympathetically. "We'll arrange transportation for you. Security detail will escort you home and make sure your apartment is safe." 3 weeks later, Sarah sat in her small Queens apartment, feeding Emma her morning bottle while watching the news. The story that dominated the headlines made her heart race even though she was safe at home. International espionage ring broken. Up in coordinated raids across 3 continents, the news anchor announced. 7 individuals arrested in connection with the theft and attempted sale of classified NATO defense protocols. The screen showed footage of Marina Volkov being led away in handcuffs from a hotel in Prague. Even in custody, the woman managed to look dignified and unrepentant. Sarah recognized that same professional demeanor that had fooled her so completely at the embassy. Her phone rang, and she saw Sergeant Wellington's name on the caller ID. Over the past 3 weeks, he had called twice to check on her well-being and update her on the investigation's progress. "Good morning, Mrs. Mitchell." His familiar British accent was reassuring. "I trust you saw the news this morning." "I did," Sarah said, settling Emma against her shoulder for burping. "It's still hard to believe I was part of something so big without knowing it." "The important thing is that it's over now," Wellington said. "Volkov and her associates are in custody, and the classified materials have been returned to their rightful place. You and Emma are safe." Sarah walked to her window and looked out at the quiet street below. For weeks, she had found herself scrutinizing every face, wondering if strangers were watching her. The paranoia was finally beginning to fade.
"I will."
"I have to testify at any trials." "Possibly," Wellington admitted. "But if so, it would be done with full security protections. Your identity would be kept confidential, and you would never be in the same room as any of the defendants." Emma had fallen asleep against Sarah's shoulder, and she gently placed her daughter in her crib, the same crib that sat next to the window where the suspicious-looking stroller had waited for 3 days, carrying secrets that could have changed the course of international relations. "Sergeant Wellington," Sarah said, "can I ask you something? Why were you at JFK that day? I mean, you're a British Royal Guard. Don't you usually stand outside palaces?" Wellington chuckled softly. "I do usually have more traditional duties, but I also serve in a specialized unit that handles international security matters involving British interests. When we learned about the embassy breach, several of us were dispatched to likely destination points to intercept the stolen materials. But how did you know to look for me specifically? We had flight manifests for everyone who visited the embassy during the relevant time period and then booked flights to major cities within 72 hours. Your name came up on the New York list, and when we saw that you were traveling alone with an infant, you fit the profile perfectly." Sarah realized how fortunate she had been. If Wellington hadn't been there, if the investigation hadn't moved so quickly, she might have carried those stolen documents home without ever knowing. What would have happened if you hadn't caught this? If I had just gone home with that hidden device? Eventually, Volkov or her associates would have contacted you to retrieve it, Wellington said grimly. They might have posed as government officials or created some emergency that required you to bring Emma and her stroller to a specific location. Once they had the device, they likely would have ensured you couldn't identify them later. The implications sent a familiar chill through Sarah. She had read enough news stories to understand what ensuring silence might have meant for her and Emma. But that didn't happen. Wellington continued in a warmer tone. You're both safe. The criminals are in custody, and classified information that could have endangered millions of people is secure again. In the intelligence world, we call that a complete success. After ending the call, Sarah sat in her quiet apartment, reflecting on how much her life had changed in just 3 weeks. She had gone to London as a grieving daughter, trying to settle her mother's affairs. She had returned as an unwitting participant in international espionage. The experience had shaken her fundamental trust in the world, but it had also shown her how many people worked quietly to keep ordinary citizens safe. Emma woke from her nap and smiled up at her mother with pure, innocent joy. Looking at her daughter's face, Sarah felt a profound gratitude for the chain of events that had led to their protection. If Wellington hadn't been at JFK that day, if the investigation hadn't moved so quickly, if she hadn't cooperated fully with the authorities, the outcome could have been tragically different. She picked up Emma and carried her to the window, looking out at the busy New York street below. Somewhere in the city, Agent Reyes was probably working on other cases, protecting other innocent people from threats they didn't even know existed. Across the ocean, Sergeant Wellington was back to his more traditional duties, but ready to respond. Again, if international security required his expertise. "You know what, Emma?" Sarah said softly to her daughter. "I think we were part of something important, something that made the world a little bit safer." Emma gurgled contentedly, reaching up to touch her mother's face with tiny, curious fingers. Sarah realized that while the experience had been terrifying, it had also taught her something valuable about the hidden networks of protection that surrounded ordinary people. Every day, professionals like Wellington and Reyes worked to identify and stop threats that most citizens never knew existed. A month later, Sarah received an unexpected package in the mail. Inside was a small silver rattle with intricate engravings, along with a note written in Wellington's precise handwriting for Emma, who traveled farther than she knew and helped keep the world a little safer. With gratitude and best wishes for peaceful journeys ahead, Sergeant J. Wellington, Grenadier Guards. Sarah smiled as she showed the rattle to Emma, who immediately reached for the shiny object with delighted squeals. It was a reminder of their extraordinary adventure, but also a symbol of protection and care from someone who had risked his career to keep them safe. As Emma played with her new toy, Sarah made a decision. She would write down every detail of their experience, creating a record that Emma could read someday when she was old enough to understand. Her daughter deserved to know how many people had worked to protect her, and how even the most ordinary trip could intersect with extraordinary events. The story would begin with a tired mother pushing a stroller through JFK Airport, unaware that she carried secrets that could change the world. It would end with the knowledge that sometimes heroes wear uniforms we don't expect, and that safety often comes from sources we never see. Most importantly, it would remind Emma that even in a world full of hidden dangers, there are always people willing to stand guard and keep innocent families safe. Outside her window, New York continued its endless rhythm of life, and Sarah Mitchell held her daughter close, grateful for the ordinary miracle of a quiet afternoon at home.